All right, the story begins in modern day outside the museum, and you'll hear a teacher talking to her class. We cut inside to see the teacher, and the kids are gathering around the little Tohu statue. And she's talking to the kids about how, the statue, and you kind of move in. You see one kid in particular is close to the glass. You can't quite make out a reflection. You move in on the statue, and the teacher's talking about how old do you think this statue is. And then that'll cross dissolve to a younger statue in the past, and it's in the fire of the kiln. And Yuji, she takes it out of the kiln and kind of swings it around, sets it on the table, and you kind of swing over to this statue of her parents. And then you see Yuji's face, and she's all happy she's done this thing. Takes off her gloves, and then she'll show respect and bow to the parents. And then she snatches up the statue, and away she goes down the hall, past the courtyard. She makes her way around the corner, and the king's doing his morning routine here with his court. She kind of reacts, and she doesn't want to show the king yet, so she slowly sneaks back. But the king, of course, will catch her. "Yuji," he says, "is that the Tao statue?" So she makes her way past these giant king statues towards the king. She falls to the ground, covering it up. The king walks up, and he says, "Yuji, do you have the Tao statue?" "Yes, your highness," she says. "May I see it, Yuji?" It's not finished yet," she says. "Please?" These guys react. She slides it towards the king. He takes out his locket, unscrews the cap, places a single drop into the statues, and then it starts to glow, and Yuji's eyes kind of light up, and she's like, "Wow." And then the king says, "Now take good care of the Tao statue." And then they turn towards the courtyard. "We may need it again," they say with concern. Now you cut to this black water, and you hear the sound of these demons chanting, and you see the reflection of their castle in the water. And they're all cheering, and fire, and this big figure's coming out. It's Yasha. And he's talking, and everybody's bowing, and he's talking about how he's going to do it, and now it's the time and to get the king, and they can rule both worlds. And his big foot comes down, and there's worms and stuff crawling out of it. And as he's still talking about how he's going to get the king, you kind of pan up his armor, and you see this big, massive guy. Then you cut ahead, and you see how how he's going to do this. There's a wall with these veins inside inside his castle, and out comes this big figure stretching, pulling out of the wall. And it kind of comes out like an incubator. It kind of comes out, and it's a demon. So that's what he's doing with the souls. And he says to his minions, he says, "And now is the time." And he raises up his arms, and these big wings come out. Cut. Back to the palace, and you see Yuji's doing the final touches on the Tao statue in front of a fireplace in her room. She's talking to the statue, and she says, if you see my parents in the netherworld, tell them I miss them very much." And you see the statue kind of soak it up for a beat, and then the candles flicker as she gives her wish. She then settles down on this stone statue of this turtle, and she falls asleep. In her dream, you see a younger Yuji with her father, and he's teaching her the fundamentals of spinning pot. And as she begins to do this, it goes bad, and it splatters everywhere and covers her with dirt. And she looks at her father. He kind of gets distracted, and then he splatters his all over the place, and they all get a good laugh at that. And this is definitely a happy time for Yuji, a good memory for her and her parents. You cut outside, and you see a single tear coming down from her head. And then this big statue comes in and grabs the tear. She kind of wakes up, but nothing's around, and she kind of sees there's a sound, there's a commotion going on outside, and she's going to go check it out. In the hallway, there's this awful sound of bats screeching, and people are running down the hallways. Outside in the courtyard, these bats are like attacking, and the noise is just awful. The king rushes out into the courtyard, and he sees what's going on here. And the pond in the middle of the courtyard starts to rumble, and then it starts to overflow, and out stretches this giant figure of Yasha, and he comes out, and the black water is rushing towards everybody. King looks, and Yuji comes from behind, and she screams, "Ah!" The king turns around and says, "Yuji, go back, go back." And he looks, and you see Yasha starts to talk. He says, "Even great kings must die." And ha ha ha, he laughs. And he says, I'll take you to hell personally. His arms come stretching out to camera, grabbing the king, and Yuji rushes after the king. He's being pulled towards Yasha, and she snatches his robe, is pulled in with him. You kind of pan down as Yasha's going down into the pond, and you follow the king and then Yuji, and they go into the pond along with the bats, and boosh, they're gone. You got to cut to this porthole, and they're flying through with all the bats, and Yuji's holding on for dear life. He says, take my hand. She's holding on, but the robe is starting to rip and tear as they're making their way through this porthole. He reaches out and he sees he's not going to get her, so he grabs the locket and pulls it from his neck, and it wraps around Yuji's hand, and then she is torn away and lost. She falls into black. Yuji, the king says. Bats fill the frame to black. Now Yuji starts to wake up here. She's pulling herself together. Her hands are in grass and flowers. And she looks around, and this place is just warm and beautiful, and it's a river, and there's fog, and there's these beautiful trees and mountains. If all of a sudden these fish come, flying by, they're not in the water, they're looking around in the air. And then she looks and sees that the islands are not islands at all. They're the floating stone turtles with people on them. And she looks around, she sees all these people floating down this river together. She's just taking this all in. Can't believe this. She looks over at the one old lady who waves, and she kind of waves back. And then from behind, there's this like lantern thing flying by her, and it goes over to the lady. She's got to get in it. She smiles, gets in the lantern, and then it goes up into the clouds, and the clouds part, and you see this magnificent heavenly structure, clouds. She can't believe it. And then more of these lanterns come in to take these people up to heaven. They're all around her. One of this character gets in this lantern, and when he moves, it reveals Yuji's parents are there. She can't believe it. She's calling for the parents. They don't hear her. Ma, pa, ma. Then their coach arrives. And she's got to act quick. She sees this stick, and she goes to pick it up and makes her way over towards them. And then she hears the sound in the forest, some crackling noises, and you look and you see that it starts to pull away, and there's a hole that's formed, and all of a sudden it starts to suck all the water, everything down it. This one figure gets trapped, and he starts turning into to like a dewy mist of water, and gets pulled towards the hole, and is sucking everything in. The parents are now being pulled away from their coach, and they're starting to turn into water, and Yuji's like, gotta act quick. She's trying to get to them. The parents see her, and they start to react to her, and she's like yelling at Ma, Ma, Dad. And she's reaching out to them, and they just get lost in the blackness. And then Yuji gets sucked in. She's like freaking out, going into the black. Then you kind of follow her for a bit, and she's in this total black swamp. There may be cricket sounds and weird noises. And then thump, she hits something, and she falls off. She hits the ground, and out comes the locket on her wrist, and it's glowing. And she sees she's hit land, and she looks around. She's like, wow, it glows, cool. This is good. And then, wow, she turns, and these demons are right there on her tail. Ah! She starts to scream. They're chasing through the woods. Ah! And they're right on her tail. Then she trips, of course. Boom, she falls to the ground. She turns on, scrambles, and they're rushing towards her. Ah! She closes her eyes, and you hear this big thunk. She starts to open her eyes. She thinks she's dead. And whoosh, she pulls out, and she sees the two guys have been impaled by a spear from the air. She looks up and sees this figure coming from the treetops, breaking through, and she panics and she runs. As it comes in, it's coming down, and you hear him call. Just Chachi calls, Yuji! She hears her name. She kind of stops, she turns, she's Cha-Cha? And there he is. She can't believe it. There he is. He's pulling the spear out. She rushes in like, I can't believe it's you. You're alive. You're here. You're moving. Everything. I just saw my parents. We got to save them. They're in there. We got to save them. We got to save all these people. And he says, we're not saving anyone. I came here to save you. I'm taking you back. He holds out his hand. And she's like, no, I got to save my parents. Yuji, come here. And he chases after her and grabs her hand. And he sees the lock. He says, where did you get this? This is the king's. And she says, yeah, the king. He gave it to me. We can use this. This has got water. It can save the souls. We can save everybody with this thing. Come on. And he's thinking about this. And she says, come on, Cha-Cha. I gave you life. Please, just do this one thing for me. He thinks about it for a minute, and then he smiles. And she's like, what's that smile for? And then you cut to this demonous place here. Pan down, you see it's just a big party of these demons in fire, and they're all chanting and singing, going crazy. Then one of these characters in the back says, Cha-Cha, it's coming. They all look and they start talking about Cha-Cha. They can't believe it. Oh, they're laughing at him because he's just one guy. Here comes Cha-Cha in with his horse flying towards them. And he's like, now, Yuji. They got a plan. She takes out the locket. She puts a little water in her hand. And she throws it. It lands on the ground, soaks in, and then the horse lands, comes running towards the gate. And then you see the ground starts to, something comes kind of coming up from the ground. They're all screaming and they're yelling. They're waiting to kill him. And she braces it, and he says, no matter what happens, stay with me, he says. And then he does a battle cry. He's running towards these guys. And then out of the darkness, he comes out there, and a whole army goes flooding behind him. And they all kind of react, and the army just crashes into the demons. They start to make their way through the demons. And, they're fighting, and swords are going, and demons are falling to the ground. And up on the top, of course, Yasha's up there looking down, and he's just like, Cha-Cha and his army, they are to laugh, they are nothing to me. And his hands come slapping together, and he pulls them apart, and he forms this twister. And then the twister sucks in the flame, and it becomes this flaming twister thing, and you kind of swing over, and you see it makes its way over the army, and then down onto his army, and they're just being, twirled around and caught on fire, and they turn to these, back to the pottery, and they get charred, and they just kind of shatter and disintegrate. The whole army's like done for. So he's really in trouble now. Cha-Cha's in trouble, and he just gets determined, and he rushes towards the gate, and you see him riding towards the gate up the spine of this thing. And Cha-Cha's in the top. He says, let's see how you deal with meteor showers, and he throws the tooth on fire at him. It's racing towards him, and Yuji says, Cha-Cha! And it crashes, hits the bridge, and he jumps over it as the demons are falling. He throws the spear, but it just misses Yasha. He looks, and he gets kind of mad. But then, he hits him with a horse, and the horse comes down and kind of breaks his foot, hits the ground, and slides into camera. Now, he's going to fend off the demons, but Yuji jumps down with the locket, and she's just using almost all of it here onto the leg, and it kind of repairs it as she's looking around. You see Yasha's getting his bearings back again, and they get back on the mountain. They're fighting off these demons, and Yuji's not looking too good, and Cha-Cha says, don't do that again! That's what's saving this, what's keeping you together. And they turn, and they look at the wall, and Yuji says, Cha-Cha, look, what's that? They look inside the mouth of the castle, and they see these veins, and they see all these figures. These are the trapped souls inside there reaching out, and they're all being turned into these demons. And then you hear Yasha say, isn't this what you want? Isn't this what you came for? And they show the king. He's trapped inside the bottle. And they're like, the king, you've stolen your last soul, Cha-Cha says. And Yasha's like, come and get it. So they're going to do battle, and he starts to chase towards him, and Yasha's ready with his fiery axe. And he's like screaming, ah! And he races towards him with his spear, and then down comes the axe, and either, hits the ground. They're swinging, they're doing battle here. And then Yasha gets a swing back, and he cracks him, knocks Yuji down on the ground, and she turns to look and see what happened to Cha-Cha. She sees him. He's in pieces, the horse and everything. And Yasha's standing over him, and you see he's just been reduced to rubble. And Yasha raises his hands in victory, and everybody below is just screaming, And Yuji, they're all laughing around her, and she's looking around. She's trying to figure out what to do, looking at Cha-Cha. And the king's like, what are you going to do? And then she decides to pull off the locket entirely. And her body just turns to this mist and kind of collapses and rushes towards Cha-Cha. It rushes over the pieces behind Yasha, through his legs into camera, whoosh, with the mist. He looks down as his fire gets, the axe gets extinguished. And then you hear a snort sound of the horse. And he realizes, something's up, and he grabs the axe, he turns to swing, and Cha-Cha's there back whole with his spear. And as the axe comes down, he thrusts his spear through the armor, through the Yasha. He's impaled here. Boom! He goes dropping to the ground. He looks at himself, with this big spear in him, and his hand starts to come apart. He's losing all his parts. He gets mad, and he reaches to grab Cha-Cha, and Cha-Cha's like, "This is for Yuji!" And he pulls it out, and out comes flame from Yasha's mouth, and he falls to the ground. The bottle breaks open, and he all comes in pieces, and the king whoosh comes back to normal size. He starts to shake off all the worms and everything. And now the place starts to come apart. Pieces are falling from everywhere. And as the demons get crushed, the souls are released up into the heavens. And Chacha's looking desperately for any sign of Yuji. He looks around at the ground, doesn't see anything. The king starts to mount the horse. All the souls are being released from the castle walls up into the heaven. The king's turning around looking for Chacha. He sees Chacha on the ground over a single drop of Yuji. He carefully scoops it up with his hands and carefully makes his way towards the horse, and everything's coming down around him. And he places it in the bowl. Now they mount on the horse, and the horse comes charging off the balcony, jumps away from the castle, up in the air, flying to camera, whoosh. And now you cut to the beautiful Netherlands, sunny, shiny. There's the castle, there's the sun ready to accept the king. And Chacha's, on his knees. The king says, "Will you come with me to visit the ancestors, great warrior Chacha?" And Chacha says, "I'm sorry, my lord, I cannot accept. I must go back to help Yuji." And the king says, "I understand. Her sacrifice was very, very brave." So the king gets in the thing and floats up to heaven, and Yuji mounts the horse. But you see he starts to cry here. And then that dissolves to a much older statue. Back in the museum behind the class, you see the statue. You're back in modern time. And the teacher's talking to the kids, and they're all laughing, and what a great story. They're all, around the statue. But you cut in on this one child we saw at the beginning. You start to make out her face, and the camera's going to swing around the glass to reveal that it's a reincarnated Yuji in modern day. And then you hear her parents come in, and she says, "Okay, it's time to go." Puts a hand on her shoulder. She turns and reacts. She hugs her family. This is the big reunion moment where Yuji's got her parents again. "Let's go home," the dad says, and they walk into camera past, and you see the tall statue, Chacha, and his eyes open. He smiles. He sees that Yuji is reunited with her family, and all is well. He's done his job. And we leave it with him as you kind of pull away from him. He has done his deed, and he's now free. And that is the end.